It's great to have you here, and I'm very excited. This is the first time we've done this topic. We've been doing consumer seminars in one way or another for about 30 years across a broad variety of topics, but the ADU topic is very hot right now and very popular because of some of the changes that have happened in the building codes for the states, and so very encouraged about that and excited about that and looking forward to sharing some information. I wanted to take a minute and just share a little bit about who we are. The Nashua Home Design Center is sort of a one-stop shop. The intent behind that basically is where we can, one client can come in and get a chance to get services across a variety of things you might need for your home. So we have a flooring store in here called Floor Me, Silver Lake Cabinetry, where you're sitting right now. We have our design build construction company in here as well, Inspired Closets in the back corner. And then Sink and Spout, our plumbing supply showroom in the corner as well, and then Budget Blinds. So those 6 companies comprise the NHDC. Just a little bit about us and why we might know a little bit what we're talking about and why we might be hopefully giving you some good information. My name is Dave Bryan. I own Blackdog and have been doing this for 40 years. I've got a degree in business from the University of Vermont, which did not prepare me at all for running a construction company, but I met my wife and I had a great time, so that was good. I started Blackdog in 1989 with a lot of enthusiasm and way too little knowledge, and been very fortunate to survive and thrive during those times. So I also do some speaking consulting with other construction companies across the US to try to help them improve operations and make their business more successful. And my wife Brenda and I live in Andover, Mass. We got a black lab, and we are very happy empty nesters of 4 kids. So it's funny, like I have friends who have like 1 or 2 kids, and when their kid goes away, like the world has ended. There's like this, you got 4 kids, they go away, you're psyched, right? So it's a difference.
Thank you. Okay, so my name is Gates Bryan. I am one of said kids who is so happy is now out of the house. So I obviously grew up in the construction industry. I grew up with dining table conversations about 2x4s and construction and all of that kind of stuff, and it kind of rubbed off on me. So I started my career by selling cabinetry, counters, and tile outside of the business. I wanted to kind of really get experience outside of the family business, and then I came back in and switched to doing design for turnkey design build. So I also have a business degree. Mine is from the University of Delaware, where I also met my lovely fiance. So it all works out, even though I'm really not using my degree at all. And then in my free time, I do coach a local swim team, and I cook and I read and I do other fun things like that.
So again, thank you for being here. We've been doing this in construction for 37 years. I've been in the business for 40, and our construction company has been recognized for sort of how we run and how we operate and process and procedure and delivering great results. So remodeling, including the building of ADUs, is a unique experience, right? We never get to do the same project twice. It's not like we're in a subdivision where there's 3 models of homes and we can just keep them going. It's always unique. And so the way you solve that problem and deliver a good experience is with systems and procedures, right? So when you're thinking about working with a company, and my goal here, this is not the Blackdog show. This will be the last you hear about us as far as the company, right? My goal is for you to get good information that gives you the opportunity to have a successful outcome with anybody you work with, right? And so hopefully you'll get some information about how you can leverage some of that knowledge to get a better outcome with any company. But systems and process help make that happen better. And we have a location in Salem, New Hampshire. That's our headquarters, and then here in Nashua as well. My goal is to give you a bunch of information about ADUs, and this is a really timely topic because in the last 2 years, both Massachusetts and New Hampshire have passed much more permissive regulations to allow ADUs to happen. It was, in the past, it was really challenging to do ADUs in some communities because they simply didn't want them. And so they made them harder to do. And they made them more constrained in size. There was numbers of communities where your ADU was capped at 600 feet, right? 600 feet is tough, right? Your typical garage is 24 by 24, and that's 576 square feet. So it's not uncommon where people try to get an ADU over the second floor of a garage in 576 square feet. And it can be done, but it's tight, and it's not, and it's challenging, right? And so Now, with more permissive regulation, we have the opportunity for larger square footage, as well as just less hurdles and less stuff to jump through. The town can't require a bunch of things that they used to require, which makes life a lot easier if you're thinking about doing an ADU. ADU, or accessory dwelling unit, are two in-law apartment or accessory dwelling unit, two the same thing, for the same name for the common thing, the outcome that you want, which is that in-law apartment or accessory dwelling unit. So same thing, they're interchangeable. They can be done attached or detached. I will tell you that we do a lot of them, and the bulk of them that we do are attached. Detached actually gives you some more flexibility, and we'll get into that, but it also can drive price, right? You don't have the benefit of, let's say if you attach an ADU right now, you often can utilize the primary power in your home to service the ADU, right? If we're doing it detached, you're going to have separate power come in. There's also some challenges around the water supply and the waste supply. All of that's solvable, but it creates a separation, which is either good or bad, right? So some people want the ADU separated for a lot of different reasons. Some people, thrive on the attached side of things. So attached or detached is important. So going up versus going out, we're talking to some clients right now who have a cape, and they want a full second floor, not a cape, where they're living up on the roof. And so going up is actually always going to be less expensive per square foot than going out with a foundation. We don't have the site costs, we don't have the foundation costs, there's a bunch of other, and we don't have some of the unknown variables of like what's in the ground, the oil tank that nobody told you about that's been there for 40 years, those kinds of things, right? So going up will always be less expensive if it can work, and if it works for the existing home. The other thing that is an option is repurposing existing outbuildings. So if you have a detached garage right now, you can actually legally repurpose that garage into an ADU and build that out to work or expand that, right? So there's options there as well. And then the last one is we have a separate company that actually does basement finishing, and that's become a super popular project as well. And if you think about it, like if you live in a 2,400 square foot home, you got a 1,200 square foot basement. That's a pretty big basement space, right? Now, you need some of that for utility area and unfinished storage or whatever, but you can get pretty lovely space out of a basement, and that far and away on a per square foot basis will be your least expensive option when you're thinking about it, right? And there are things we can do now to make basements not feel so much like basements, right? And there's things that we have to do to create basements that are safe for living in terms of your bedroom and so forth, and making sure we have multiple forms of egress in the event of an emergency. So basements are always an alternative as well, assuming you've got the headroom in your basement space and assuming that the basement's configured well to design a space that works. Okay? Questions about any of that? So, please.
You're still confined to that, whatever the square footage that they're allowing?
So, interestingly, in finishing a basement off, not the same constraints, right? So you could do a 1,200 square foot basement and finish it, and we could get that permitted without a problem. We may relegate 900 square feet of that to the ADU and 300 square feet of that to a family room or something like that. But you've got much more flexibility in doing it that way, as opposed to there's much more rigid structure when we're pouring a foundation that's got to be a 900 square foot foundation, right? So more flexibility in the basement. That's a great question. Thank you. Some examples, right? So detached, this is a super low budget alternative, right? You can actually see in this case, this structure is up on piers. I'm not a fan of that because it's very hard to make comfortable. That project needs to be insulated in a special way, and we have to make sure we're dealing with the water supply line and the waste line in a special way, but it's a doable option, right? This was a beautiful ADU that we did a few years ago. That's a basement ADU that we did. And then here's an example of moving up over a garage to create that space, all detached. So all very workable, all has different pros and cons for how that flies, right? And how we make that work. So why are we doing ADUs? It's our experience that the majority of time that we're going after ADUs is because we have families combining, right? And that takes a lot of different shapes. And so sometimes that is the family home. Mom and dad have lived there forever. The kids have already moved out. Now the kids are coming back. They get the home, and mom and dad are going to build an ADU and still live attached to the home or maybe on the property, be close to the kids, but the kids now have the opportunity to get into a primary home. And we all know what's going on with sort of real estate pricing, right? Real estate pricing is super hard and out of reach. If you didn't live in the home while all the appreciation happened, it's really a big hurdle to come in from zero and buy something, right? So some of that, so not only is the permitting more permissive and the ADUs are more, I guess, desirable from a code perspective, but economically, there's also some compelling reasons as well that ADUs can make sense, okay? The other thing that's nice about the ADUs is we've also done a number of them where mom and or dad have got some ambulatory challenges and they're moving in, and now when we're moving in, we're thinking about first floor living and thinking about accessibility and thinking about how we make that space safe for long-term aging in place, right? And the nice thing, if that works and the family dynamic works and everyone's supportive of that, then you get the ability to have extended family be, the opportunity for caregiving and oversight and make sure that people are safe and secure. And the other thing that is an option to think about is future planning for a caregiver. So you can build an ADU and you can live in your home, in your primary home, and if you begin to need caregiving and you don't want to move out or move into a continuing care facility, you can hire a caregiver if the budget allows, and they can have the ADU as a private apartment and then be there as you need them, right? So we see that in the planning process of some people as well. And then the last one is the opportunity for passive income, right? So ADUs right now might be purpose designed for family and the progression of life and how that works. But when times change, how's that structure and space get used, right? And so the alternative in many communities now, it's okay to actually create passive income from renting your ADU. In some communities it's not. So that's one of those things that New Hampshire and Mass have not universally mandated or permitted. They don't control that in all the towns. So some towns have no issue with it whatsoever. Some towns are definitely against it, and you have constraints there, right? So that's need to know how the town manages that and how they look at that in the process. Questions about any of that? All right.
What's the difference
Please.
between Massachusetts and New Hampshire as far as that particular question?
Yes. So neither makes it universally approved, right? So and I'm actually going to take you through the regulations for Mass and for New Hampshire in just a minute. So that's a great question, Bill. So this is the New Hampshire side of things. It has become super permissible and easier to go through the process now to get approval. And so your structure can be attached or detached. It does not matter. Logically speaking, there's a little more baggage and a little more challenge from a design side, typically, when you're attaching, right? So we need to figure out what the right attachment point is. We need to make sure that it's architecturally complementary to the house and you don't just look like you got a wart on the side of your house that's your ADU, right? That's an important consideration as well. And there are existing constraints, like where's the waistline leave your house? Where's the power come into your house? Where's the driveway? All those things make the attaching a little more challenging and consequently a little more expensive to do. But as far as code goes in New Hampshire, attached or detached is fine. This is a great thing. You do not need to create a deed restriction. It used to be in many communities where you would have to put on the deed that this is for family use only, and that they would put handcuffs around the use of that space. Today, that's not the case. You do not need to, expose or claim why you're using that space. You just can have it as by right, right? And they can't make you jump through any more special hoops on the permit side of things. You don't need a special permit. You don't need a variance. That used to be a common requirement. Doesn't need that now, right? There is, however, only one ADU per dwelling. So think about it in terms of like one ADU per business lot or per residential lot. And you're not allowed to do an ADU if you live in a duplex or a triplex or a multifamily unit like that. It has to be a legitimate single family home, and then you have the ability to create an ADU, okay? And this is interesting. I was in Somerville a couple weeks ago, and I saw an ADU that had just gotten built, and a contractor was advertising for it and was charging $1 million per ADU in Somerville, right? And so they have a model that they're now, and Somerville, like space is at a premium there, so consequently square footage for living is at a premium, but they were charging $1 million to build it. But if you spend $1 million on your ADU, it is tied to the property forever. You can't sell that separately. You can't liquidate that value ever. It's tied to the property. So that's an important piece to understand. And then they talk about sort of accessibility. So how do you get into and out of the structure? So it does not have to You do not have to have the ability to move back and forth between the structures in New Hampshire. And you can have it work that way or not. You can enter the structure from the exterior or from the interior, or just from the exterior. You can do it, or just from the interior, either way. That, again, that's another example of things that are more permissive than they used to be. They used to be much more clear about not wanting to have two separate front doors to make it appear that you have a separate rental unit. That was the problem. Now you don't have that constraint. You can have that if you like, no problem at all. Right? ADUs can now, in many communities, go up to 900 square feet, which is significant, right? So 900 square feet can readily accommodate 2 bedrooms. So if you wanted an ADU that then had a guest room available for you, then that now exists where it really didn't in the past. So, questions about any of this? Please.
We have a home that initially was a ranch, got raised, put on the second level
Sure.
as, for the sake of argument, an in-law apartment.
Yep.
It has a bath, it has a kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
2 bedrooms. Okay.
Yep.
My son is presently living there with his girlfriend and our autistic child.
Okay.
But it's a tough living situation because if money were no issue, they would be living separately and co-parenting.
Sure. Okay. Oh,
So they're kind of forced to be together for the benefit of the child,
big challenge.
but it's challenging
Yep.
because raising an autistic child that doesn't speak is also challenging.
100%.
We have a basement. The square footage of the basic house is 960 square feet.
Yep.
Okay. The prior owner actually had a large family and had people living downstairs.
Mm-hmm.
Bedrooms set up down there,
Sure.
kitchen area, 3/4 bath.
Yep.
Okay. Back when they built the mall in Rockingham,
Mm-hmm.
Salem, they had some flooding issues or whatever, and they did a settlement with the builder and the contractor. That's when they actually went upstairs and put the family upstairs.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So we got this residual area
Yep.
that at one time was used for living space.
Sure.
Hasn't been used for many years. Over
Sure.
there. When we looked into the possibility of developing that space,
Yep.
we ran into that one ADU. And since the upstairs is considered an ADU,
Oh, yeah.
now what do we do if we want to actually use downstairs, which already has the kitchen area and already has
Right.
the
Three-quarter bath.
three-quarter bath,
Right.
and could be made a living space where they could live separately in the same house, first floor, third floor,
Interesting.
and still co-parent
Yep.
and still have the support of grandparents.
Yeah.
Do a lot.
So you are caught by that. That's,
So,
yeah.
We don't
What
have
we
any
were
choice.
told by a contractor at the time was, you could put something downstairs and develop it, but you could only have one stove between those 2 units. That was the distinction that made it an ADU as opposed to something else. Is that true?
Yep. So when you get into a situation that's that sort of unique and have that much nuance to it, that's where your best bet is to sit down with the building inspector and explain your situation and look for solutions, right? It happens. The town of Salem, the building inspector's good. They're a good setup. They're there to help, right? And work through the issues. And I'm unfamiliar with any constraint about the one oven thing. I don't think that's that relevant.
We looked at these a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And the contractor that we were dealing with went to them and talked to them and
Okay.
said that would be the constraint. And his workaround was, we have to decide which of the two is going to actually use a stove.
Sure.
Okay?
Sure.
And nowadays, you don't need a stove. You got air fryers, you got all these
Exactly.
other
Right. And that
that
wouldn't.
work.
Right. Yeah. And so the other thing that's to be mindful of relative to the basement, if your basement was finished and inhabited earlier, it probably doesn't meet egress code. So every bedroom needs to actually have 2 means of egress. So you need to be able to not only walk in and out of the bedroom from the traditional door, but then you either have to have an exterior door at grade, or you have to have a window that's significant enough in size to make egress, which we can do.
They were gonna dig down.
Perfect. That's exactly how you solve that. Right.
Create
Yeah.
that type of window.
Yeah, so that's doable, and so some middle ground in there is you can make that work. But and if have you had any history of flooding since then?
No.
Okay, perfect. All right, so that was a one-off. All right, great. So yeah, it sounds like there's room there, but interesting. Actually, you're the first folks I've come across that have had like already an ADU in place and met that constraint.
We're
So
right around the corner.
okay,
We're in South Paul's.
okay, sure, yeah, great. So, so at any rate, that's the ADU side of things, and the one per dwelling issue that's sort of unusual, but not unworkable. A couple other things: the owner must occupy either the ADU or the primary residence. Right? You do not have to have a familial relationship, but one or the other has to be occupied by the owner. Right? So that's an important constraint. But if the ADU, if you then, as an example, rented the ADU, you chose to do that for income purposes, doesn't need to be a family connection there, okay? And the same building code applies for your ADU structure, attached or detached, as for the primary structure today. So we are now conforming to today's code in either Mass or New Hampshire, so we need the same energy performance, we need the same electrical code related, we need the same heating and cooling situation as you do in your primary house, were it to be built today, okay? Which,
Require you to upgrade existing if you?
great question, great question. So, as an example, if there's an existing thing within your home that is non-code conforming and you're not touching it as a part of the ADU work, you are not required to bring it up, right? So if you have let's say you're living in an older home and your stair is not conforming, it's too steep, which is like in old farmhouses are very, very common. We are not required to correct that problem as a part of the ADU construction unless the ADU work impacts the stair, and then the stair needs to meet code, okay? And that's universal, like that's true across the board. So the size right now in New Hampshire cannot be made to be less than 750. So for in some of the communities in New Hampshire who are averse to it, they're gonna put that floor in and say, the biggest one you can have is 750, right? You can't go any bigger. However, you, by right, for towns that allow it, can go up to 9 in New Hampshire. Or 950, my mistake. And you don't have to have a separate electrical meter, and you don't have to have a separate meter, a separate panel, but you can, right? So another thing that we deal with a lot are if families are combining, and let's say mom and dad are coming and they build the ADU, and mom and dad want to be financially independent. They don't want to be a burden to the kids. They actually want that separate electric meter. They don't want to have to worry about every month, do I just cut you a check for $60 or how's that work? They want to know what it costs them. They want to pay their way. They want to make sure they're being independent, right? So you can have that or not have that. Sorry?
Same thing if you're renting as well.
Exactly, yeah.
So if you're renting, it might, or
Yeah.
thinking about in the future using this as a rental property, it also might make sense to have that separate panel because it helps ease that sort of odd in-between zone for a landlord.
Same is true of water. So you can actually have a separate tap. The town is going to charge you for that service to bring you to separate tap for your water, but you can do that as well, and you get a separate meter. Now, the reality is water's not very expensive, so that is probably it'd be a long time before the juice is worth the squeeze there, in the big scheme of things.
A child that takes multiple showers a day and has a pool, that's a whole different thing.
That's fair, right? And on the septic system side of things, this is really an important thing to know, right? So most systems are designed by bedroom count. It doesn't matter how many bathrooms you have in your house. It matters how many bedrooms you have in your house. And so if you have a 3-bedroom house, the likelihood is you have a 3-bedroom septic. It's relatively rare that a builder will, out of generosity, put a 4-bedroom septic into a 3-bedroom house, right? So your septic is tied to your bedroom count. The nice thing about this is if you add an ADU, you've added another bedroom, right? So your existing septic is non-compliant for that ADU. Most communities, however, will allow you to hire an engineer. It also will require you to do what's called a perk test, and perk test is just excavate the soil to make sure it absorbs at a certain rate. Once the engineer has that data on your soil and how well it absorbs, they can design a 4-bedroom septic and put that on file. Right? You pay for that design, you put that on file, you don't have to build it. But what that does for the town is let them know that when your current system fails, you actually have the ability on the property to put a 4-bedroom septic in, and then everyone's good and safe and healthy, right? But it allows you to defer that cost until such time as your current system fails, which is a really nice thing. And the reality is, septics don't fail that often, right? Now, if you have a lot of showers and a lot of things going on, all bets are off. But you're on sewer.
We're on sewer.
Yeah, so that's a beautiful thing.
That was one of the perks of them flooding up the things. The town came down and gave you the option to go on town sewer and
Right.
put up. Or
Right.
not.
And if anybody who's ever given the option, sewer's the way to go if you can make that happen. So, and then you can convert a non-conforming structure. That's the other thing that's really nice about this. If you have an existing non-conforming structure, that you couldn't build today without a variance, you could potentially convert that to an ADU without any extra hoops to jump through and without a variance required, right? So as an example, that garage structure, which as a garage, it may be allowed to be 5 feet off the lot line. As a house, it can't. It needs to be 20 feet off the lot line or whatever the case may be. So it lets you take some structures that weren't intended for this use and now turn it into this use legally.
What
Make
is
sense?
the definition of the non-home structure? Like, for example, is that something that has to have a foundation under it?
Yes.
Or
Yes. Yeah.
can't be a shed that you can
Can't be a shed. It can't be a shed. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't make the ADU like that example I showed you where the ADU is up on piers. You could do that, but those piers are the foundation. Those piers are going to be 4 feet deep and support the structure on that. So it's not moving up and down with frost and and thaw. So, but yeah, it does need to be on a foundation.
go back real quick to the septic issue.
Yep.
Bedroom versus square footage. Is Massachusetts the same?
Mass has a constraint that says 900 square feet or no more, or 50%, no more than 50% of the existing house square footage, right? So as long as you have an 1,800 square foot house, you could have a 900 square foot addition. Did I answer that question right?
More of the issue of does the septic design limit you to bedrooms versus square footage?
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry. Yes, it is exclusively bedrooms. So you could have a 4,000 square foot home with one primary suite and have a 1-bedroom septic system.
And a bedroom.
That's a bizarre.
And a bedroom is defined by a room that contains a closet.
Generally.
Although if you submitted one without a closet to a building inspector, they'd be like,
So that
looks
sounds
like you're
a
just trying to get around not having a closet.
Yeah, that sounds a little bizarre, but that's actually how it works. It is all driven by bedroom count, not bathroom count, not square footage. Bedroom count is what the big driver is.
And when you're saying permitting, you're only talking about building inspector permission versus planning board or something like that? Or
Well,
zoning?
yeah, so the building inspector is enforcing the zoning code, and so all this stuff we're talking about and the ability to build an ADU is tied to zoning code, right? So the zoning, and that's what's changed for everyone in New Hampshire and everyone in Mass.
So if you violate that, then you gotta go and get a possible.
Right, were you to do, the only way to violate it is essentially not pull a permit and then get caught, right? Because you wouldn't get a permit issued if what you were asking for was outside what was allowed for zoning. Does that make sense?
However, if it is outside of what you allow, so for example, if you're trying to build a structure that is too close to the lot line or something like that, as part of your addition, you could still try to go through the process of getting it permitted by requesting a variance, which is then when a town board gets involved.
So that's why I said the shed would be on the line versus a house that would be certain feet back.
Right.
Yeah, that's.
But the beautiful thing is today, there are way fewer scenarios where you'd actually have to deal with the variance. And the variance is, it's not undoable, but it's a hassle, right? And you got to go through some more hoops to make that work. And today now, you get to do these things by right, right? And that's a big advantage.
Which I would think maybe makes getting a variance a little bit easier.
It does. It does. And it depends on the community, though. There are some communities that, they give them out like water. And some communities are super restrictive about it. And that's just sort of whatever the flavor of that town's perspective on how they look at lots, how they look at density, how they look at housing,
They're doing this because they think it's a good idea for the residents, or what are the states
Right.
making?
Well, and there's some not in my backyard stuff, right? So everyone's pro more housing. People see that there's a reason and desire for that. Maybe people aren't quite so pro more housing when the ADU went in their neighbor's backyard and now they've got twice the number of people living on that piece of property behind them than they did before, right? So there's all those issues, and there's always going to be those issues. There's nothing you can do about that. But in general, both states have decided that this will be something that will help alleviate housing challenges, housing shortages, right? So,
I have a question.
oh, please.
Oh, on the septic tank.
Hmm?
Can you go over again, you said it refers to number of bedrooms or?
Number of bedrooms.
Not bathrooms.
Not bathrooms. Strangely enough, you could have 10 bathrooms. But the issue is the amount of water that flows through the house will be a function of the number of people living in the house. And so they use the bedroom driver as the thing that determines the number of people living in the house. It can get a little more complex in terms of room count and things like that. It's not worth talking about that here, but yeah. And so tank size. The average tank size that we see in most residential structures is 1,500 gallons. If you have a 1,000-gallon tank, you may have a challenge there, but once again, that would be then redesigned in the new system. Most of the system issue is around the size of the field, right? The bigger the field, the more bedrooms in the field. The tank may be 1,500 gallons, regardless of whether it's a 3-bedroom septic or a 4-bedroom septic, but the field is bigger for a 4-bedroom septic, right? And so you need the space in your property to be able to manage that bigger field. And once that field's in place, that's all that gets to go there, other than grass, right? You can't use it for anything else. You could technically put an engineered system under a driveway, but that's a little bit more involved and kind of a big deal. Now, in Mass, same kind of concept, but 900 is the cap, and some towns can restrict that down, but no larger than 900, right? And generally speaking, because the state's pushing for this, there's not a ton of restrictions that are making you go down depending on the town, right? So, but you still have to do your research with the town. In this case, unlike New Hampshire, they do want a separate entrance that is either from inside or outside, an entry hallway. So they want a connection that creates commonality between the addition and between the ADU and the house in some way, if it's attached, right? And so that's an important constraint, and they need to meet any restrictions that the town has, right? So I'm going to show you in a minute that there actually are separate setbacks that are allowed for ADUs and in many communities, and they're tighter. So if that right now your house has to be 20 feet off the side and 30 feet off the front, your ADU in some cases can be just 5 or 6, right? So that's actually a big help in where you can place that ADU if you're thinking about doing it detached. But that's still regulated on a town-by-town basis. Some towns will say, no, you know what, we're fine with the ADU, but you have to actually make it fit within the footprint of where the house can go on the lot, right? Which is a different set of setbacks, and I'll show you that in a second. And then, once again, familial relationship is not required, and you can't sell your ADU separately in Mass either. Towns are not allowed to ask you for a special permit or a variance to get the ADU. That was a common issue before, or dictating its use, right? So they also can't say, all right, I'm only going to use this for family purposes for as long as I live, kind of a thing. And when you then go to sell the house, that's constrained, that piece of property, that part of the house is constrained for the same use for the life of the house when you deed restrict it. You don't have to deed restrict it anymore. That's a pretty helpful thing. Once again, same building code, same efficiency, all that sort of stuff. You're allowed to tie into the existing utilities. That's true of New Hampshire as well. That's the most cost-effective way to do it. If you have enough utility power in your house, as an example, right? You can tie into your waste line, you can tie into your water line. All that stuff works and is the more cost-effective solution. And non-conforming structures, like garages, can be converted to ADUs, same deal. Setback requirements may be more restrictive than the main may not be more restrictive than the main residence. So this is saying that if the main residence requires 20 feet on the side and 30 feet on the front and the back, you can fit a structure in that property in addition to the main residence, you're good. But if you want to go closer to the lot line, some towns will not allow that to happen, right? Some towns do, some towns don't. And it is very much a town-by-town basis, and that's in their zoning regulations. So if you can't sleep at night and you want to get online and look at your town's zoning regulations, then you can get some good information, right? So that's it, setbacks. And then, and often, there's a more liberal ADU setback, and we'll take a look at that in 1 second. So this is the example. One of the things that Massachusetts did that I thought was really cool was once they made the regulation, they sponsored a competition. So a bunch of architectural firms got together and submitted model ideas of how you might think about doing an ADU. So this is an example of a floor plan. I'm going to just switch gears real quick and go to a different PowerPoint. So this is an example of a 900 square foot space. I think it's 900 square feet, but it's pretty, it's actually less than, I'm sorry about that. This is smaller. But the nice thing about the way they've thought about this is they've designed a first floor plan, and in this, I'm going to show you in a minute, in this first floor plan, there's lots of flexibility. They've actually designed it so that it could be used for an in-law application. It could be used for a kid returning from school. It could be used for it could be used as a home office concept. So there's a lot of different uses. They've made it really flexible. And they also built this non-habitable loft. Now, it's called a non-habitable loft, but they also show it having a bed up there, right? So a little extra overflow space doesn't impact the footprint square footage, right? And that's a pretty big deal. And they're also showing this as having the ability to be highly efficient, right? So the building itself, from an insulation perspective, highly efficient. And then if you orient it properly on your lot, you can then do solar on there and get to a point, if you're really careful about it, of being what's called net zero. Has anybody heard that term before? Net zero is a house that effectively has no operating cost from a power perspective. So that's pretty slick. If you look, and this is an example of how they are playing out sort of the different scenarios. So they've got a design where they reconfigure the floor plan a little bit for a young couple versus a visiting family versus aging in place versus working from home. So same footprint, a bunch of different ways to think about how that building can get used. And there are at least 10 of these homes, 10 of these concepts that architectural firms submitted in this competition that are free for access on the mass.gov website. And it's super helpful. But one of the things I really wanted to show you was this other feature, which is taking a look at the lot line. So the outer 70 by 100 feet, that's the lot size. So 7,000 square foot lot. And these other dashed lines, this one, like the lot line around here, the inner lot line, that's where you could locate your principal dwelling anywhere within that space, anywhere within from here to here, right? And if you look at that, that worked great for the principal dwelling. They could have moved it forward, they could have moved it backward, they could have done whatever they wanted to, but it really isn't enough room for you to then do a detached ADU. So in this case, in this community that they proposed, which I think might have actually been Cambridge, was one of the ones they were thinking about. They then have created, Cambridge allows a 5-foot setback and a 6 on the sides and a 6-foot rear setback. And the front setback stays the same. So they don't want you end up having an ADU encroaching upon the front of the property, but you can tuck a nice little ADU back in the corner and life is good. You got a walking path right out to the driveway where you can park and that's a really nice setup. So they then get this competition gets into a whole bunch more stuff about energy efficiency and things like that, which is sort of beyond, I love it, it's construction stuff, but it's beyond the purview of what we should be talking about today. But it's a great resource to get on the mass.gov site and look at the different ideas they have and how they might get 450 to 900 square feet, because they have some of these that are as small as 450. And you could look at them and say, could I live in that? Is that workable? Or is that just going to be too tight for me? Please, question.
In your experience, have you seen them being able to go to setback lines in New Hampshire? Or is that just Mass?
So community by community is where it's driven, unfortunately. It's not, they went a long way to standardize stuff and make life easier, but they couldn't go all the way. They couldn't they couldn't push that. They would have met with too much resistance, right? And we are definitely live free or die kind of like, don't tell me what I'm doing, right? And there's governments are like that in New Hampshire. So it is a community by community thing for sure. But keeping in mind too, that there's a lot more larger lot sizes in New Hampshire than there are in Mass, right? So you can accomplish a lot even with a less generous setback. So depending on your lot, right? So.
We have like a lot of setback things in Mass, like it's very tight. What would be a nice, thoughtful approach to, as we start this journey here, because we're gonna run into that.
Yep.
What would you say, step one, go to the building inspector or have the contractor, what do you think?
Yeah, so first, that's a great question. You need to start the beginning of the process with design. So, and if your contractor is a design build contractor and has design skills, awesome. That's job one. And the first thing your contractor will do as part of the design exploration is figure out what zoning allows for, right? So before we go out to, many times if a client calls us to talk about a project, we'll just do a little homework before we even go out to for the first time and have in our head what's possible based on zoning, right? So that's job one. And then you can start designing solutions that meet your needs within those constraints. Okay, please.
What about being grandfathered in?
Grandfathered in what capacity?
The primary dwelling is like 5 feet on the setback.
Okay, great.
That probably doesn't come into play with this.
It does. So that's what they call existing non-conforming, right? And you can, like we talked about, you can convert an existing non-conforming into being a usable space for you, but you can't. But the town will not actually let you knowingly build a non-conforming structure. Does that make sense? So So you can't. So even if your house is non-conforming, you could attach a structure to it, but the structure you attach has to be conforming or has to be not making the non-conformity worse. Right? That's kind of the, so let's say your problem was front setback and you're too close to the street or whatever it is, right? They will not let you get closer, but if the back setback is actually fine and you can put an addition off the back setback, the fact that your main house doesn't meet the zoning ordinance, you would still be allowed to do that addition off the back, right?
Yeah, I get to talk now. Okay, setback, schmetback. Let's have some fun. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about just some more kitchen and bath and actual sort of design ideas to consider when you're starting to explore this process. First of all, in kitchens, right, we want to blend the combination of size constraints and usability. And some of that will be driven by whether or not the structure is attached or detached, whether or not the in-laws have access to the existing kitchen or whoever's living in that space has access to the existing kitchen in the home, and whether or not that person who's living in there wants to use the existing kitchen or says, no, I need my own space. And so depending on those answers to those questions is going to drive a lot of the design. Because in ADUs, sometimes you want a full kitchen, sometimes we want a kitchenette, sometimes we want a very compact kitchen. It kind of depends from person to person. But in general, when we're dealing with a small space, we're going to want to focus on a compact layout. So most ADUs benefit from what's a compact design, an efficient work triangle. So a work triangle is the distance between a sink, a refrigerator, and a range. Or a cooktop. Specifically. The ovens don't really need to be close by because you're not accessing them regularly, but we're thinking about the things that we are going back and forth between regularly when we're cooking. So the smaller that we can get that work triangle to be, the more efficient a kitchen design is going to be in general. So we want to think about that. We want to try to aim for full-size appliances. One of the reasons that that is the case is because replacing non-standard sized appliances can be tricky. You know, you can get the 18-inch little skinny fridges, or you can get 33-inch fridges and all of these sorts of odd sizes, but there's not a guarantee that in 10 years they're still making that model. And so then all of a sudden you have an opening for an appliance that we can't replace. Same thing happens with like 18-inch dishwashers and things like that, more compact sized dishwashers. So where possible, I try to say, go with your 30-inch range, your 30-inch fridge, and your 24-inch dishwasher. That's going to be your standard sizes. You don't need, like this one shows a 36-inch fridge. You don't need to go that big necessarily if it's just, you know, 2 people living in that space. It totally depends, and it's completely up to the person who's in that space. I also recommend making use of vertical storage. This is something to consider whether or not you add if it's going to be an aging in place structure, right? Vertical storage is great if you have vertical height, if you can access the vertical storage, or if you are physically able to reach up high and take things down low. Otherwise, you're going to want to make use of things like drawers, you're going to want to make use of some cabinet accessories like pull-outs, all of that kind of stuff, roll-outs, trays, that kind of stuff to make it easier on you to access things. And then we also want to make sure we're looking at durable, easy to care for surfaces, especially if we're considering converting this into a rental at any point in time. So that is maybe the brand of cabinetry that we use. Maybe we choose to use stock cabinetry because it's going to be a little bit more cost friendly, and we don't really want to put a bunch of money into something that is eventually going to be a rental that needs to be easily replaced and something like that. Same thing with countertops. Maybe the ADU is not the place for the beautiful quartzite or marble or something that's going to stain and not live up to the test of time. So quartz surfaces are awesome. Same thing with flooring, right? If you're ever thinking about renting this, hardwood floors are going to have to get refinished on a relatively regular basis. Even though they're beautiful, you can get LVP, luxury vinyl plank, or alternatives that are very pretty, but they stand up to the test of time a little bit better and heavy use. Okay. So these are a couple of examples of different spaces, right? So these two up here are showing kitchenettes, right? So this is something that I would recommend for an attached structure where somebody is able to access the regular full kitchen on a regular basis as needed. You know, maybe.
Can I jump in? So we did a project for an Italian family, and cooking and gathering around food was a big deal, right? And mom was going to live in the ADU, and mom was totally good with sharing the main kitchen because she felt like cooking was her contribution to the family, and so a kitchenette was perfect for her. And then we did a project for another family where mom had lived independently for a long time, loves her grandkids to a point, and wanted separation, right? So she had a full separate kitchen. So there's a lot of variability based on family.
Yes, exactly. And so when we're dealing with kitchenettes, you want to think like, what do I put in the teeny tiniest apartment in New York City? That's what we're putting in a kitchenette space, right? Here, we've got a convection oven that kind of looks like a microwave. We've got a small little cooktop, an 18-inch dishwasher, a fridge, and then a very small, probably 24-inch fridge there. This is going to be enough to fry an egg in the morning. You're going to be able to make your coffee, make your tea at night, that kind of thing, but it's not going to be for like constant in-depth food prep, which not everybody needs. Same thing with this one. This kind of disguises it, right? You could potentially put this in a very small one bedroom, one of those 450 square feet type of deals, right? Where you really only need it integrated into the living space. It does not need to be its own room per se. And then this one over in the corner, we have a galley style. So we also want to think about being ADA compliant in some time. So if we're going with a galley kitchen, how wide does the galley kitchen have to be? Which galley is basically a hallway, a kitchen that looks like a hallway kind of, so that maybe a wheelchair could get around in that space. What are counter heights? Do we need to have ADA conformity right now? Or do we need to design something that could be ADA compatible in the future, right? What does that look like? So oftentimes I'll pose these questions to clients and they'll say, I didn't even think about this. And it's then time to go and have a family meeting with mom and dad or whoever the parties are and say, okay, let's really consider your current health now, what your health might look like in 5 years, in 10 years, all that kind of stuff, which is a little bit morbid and sometimes scary to consider and think about, but it is important to do.
Better to plan ahead.
Better to plan ahead, exactly.
It is mind-boggling to me. We do bathroom renovations for couples, and I actually had a couple take a 60-year-old couple. I said, okay, so we're going to go ahead and just block for grab bars, and if you don't want the grab bars now, we'll put blocking in there so later you can put them in. And the person was offended, like, I don't need grab bars. I'm like, never gonna. Oh, so you're done aging? Like, so
I'll check it out.
right. So it's an interesting thing.
Yes.
So if you were using one of these as going into plan, you went to Airbnb or something,
Yep.
do you have to design it, what was it?
Like accessible in design, you do not.
No.
Do you have to do that going in?
No, you do not. Nope, it does not have to be accessible, even if you were going to do like an Airbnb, like a short-term rental kind of thing, because you can rent Airbnbs. I remember on a family vacation one time, we rented like this old stone like cottage place that was definitely not accessible. So
it's not a public building.
Yeah,
That's where
exactly.
Like were you doing this in a public space, then you'd be mandated to do ADA, like the bathrooms we have in this building are ADA, no option, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Please.
Yes.
So, all right, if we go right out the gate and make this whole thing ADA accessible at this point in our lives, and as years go on and I want to rent it out after, people pass and stuff, can you touch on that? Is it a good thing? Is that a bad thing?
Awesome
Are we
question.
jumping in too early to make it ADA accessible?
So I don't think there's ever, so there's different degrees too of ADA accessibility,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So whether or not it meets public mass code, like what you would find in a public use space, or if it is something that is just a little bit more ADA friendly, like it's wider passageways, but it might still have the same countertop height, so it might not be accessible to somebody in a wheelchair, you can decide on whether or not that's going to be something that we think about to incorporate into the design. So you absolutely could make something fully ADA compliant, but if you are like if you're planning on renting it down the line, ADA compliance means that all of your countertops are much lower than your standard countertops. So it can be tricky to then, unless you are specifically searching for a tenant who has the need for ADA accessibility at that level.
Yeah.
So I would say you want to make sure that your passageways are wide enough for people to maneuver, but you might not want to consider truly like lowering everything down.
Now, in contrast to that, if you know that someone's got a degenerative condition and they're going to be in a wheelchair at some point in time, then managing for that and designing for that now, you know it, and that does mean it's not going to be desirable in most cases to the next tenant. And so you just need to, in your mind, realize, all right, these cabinets are coming out at the end of, when we have a life transition, these cabinets are coming out, we're putting a new kitchen in. Like that kind of a thing. The bathroom, not so much, much more constrained about the kitchen. We can make an ADA compliant bathroom that anybody would be happy using, not the same with the kitchen.
Okay.
All right,
I got another question.
please.
Let's say you're doing, you have a septic system, but you have public water,
Yep.
and you put the ADU in the back. You don't want to tie into the septic. Can you do composting or something like that? And then
For-
do off-grid electric and tie into the water?
I think that would depend on town by town on their allowances for code. I think New Hampshire you'd be more likely to get away with it than in Mass, just off the top of my head.
So you could do a composting toilet, is that what you're asking about, right? But then you still have your sink from a sanitary perspective and or some bathing facility that's got to go somewhere. So that's the constraint, you know, if it were at a cabin, off the grid, that kind of thing, but if it's in an existing space, if you have town water, do you not also have town sewer access?
No, it's septic.
It's purely septic. Okay, so yeah, so I think that, but however, the town would give you a hall pass on redesigning the septic. You could tie in a bathroom from a detached unit into your existing septic and be okay.
One of the biggest things is proper clearance in tight spaces. It is one of the biggest stumbling blocks for somebody who might be designing their own kitchen, if that's something that you want to embark on. Or when you're thinking about a design, it's good to double check that, for example, when you buy your appliances, you could buy an appliance with an integrated handle or one that sticks out. And that handle that sticks out might mean that in very tight spaces you don't have drawers that open properly. I don't know if you guys have ever seen like things online where you're like, okay, this is my new build, and they open the dishwasher and the dishwasher connects with the oven because they're right across from each other, and somebody didn't consider that when they were designing. So when we're dealing with small spaces, we want to make sure that we're thinking about how things open, how the hardware impacts our clearances, all of that kind of stuff, because there are so many times that I have seen like the oopsie, didn't think about that, and it's built and it's in, and now we are living with something that does not work properly.
Yeah, and with small spaces, it really, you don't have the luxury of being sloppy with design. With small spaces, you got to be really, really thoughtful. So you're getting every inch out of a utility at that space.
Yes. Yeah, and planning in advance what your appliances are going to be is also a really good idea, so that your designer can look at everything and know, yes, this is going to work. It's not going to create problems down the line. I highly recommend adding an island or a peninsula into your space, even if it's a rolling one, even if it's one that you bought off of Wayfair or a Pottery Barn or something like that, that adds another prep space. So if you're doing a kitchenette, you might want to consider a 36-inch by 24-inch little rolling island that you can lock in place, and it just adds another drop zone, which helps at the times when you are using that for a more extensive cooking project. We talked about standard appliance suites. I highly recommend in small spaces, Fisher Paykel is a great brand they kind of came into vogue by being the go-to brand for apartments in New York. So they're very shallow, they're made for compact spaces, which is awesome. And we always want to get counter depth appliances as well when we're looking at an an ADU space.
What was that
Yep.
manufacturer? I never heard of it.
Fisher Paykel. Yeah.
Are they German or?
I don't know. I think so. Barron's carries them across the street. So yeah, And they actually they have dishwashers that actually have 2 drawers, which is kind of cool. So you can have one have dirty stuff, one have clean stuff, and just revolve and rotate them, right?
Yeah, which is also great for small spaces, double drawer dishwashers. And then good ventilation, something to consider in both Mass and New Hampshire is if you are a gas-loving person when cooking, you refuse to cook on anything but gas, that's fine. We can still do gas in new spaces, but both New Hampshire and Massachusetts are pushing away from people using gas. So they make it more expensive for you to have gas appliances in those suites by requiring something called makeup air, which basically means that if there is a appliance that is off-putting BTUs of gas, you need to have a hood of a certain CFM range, which is anything above 400 CFMs, which all gas stoves today require a hood that's above 400 CFMs. When you put in makeup air, it's sucking old air out and it's putting some new air back in. That is about a $5,000 expense. I always like to highlight that as like, that's not an expense that's needed if you have electric.
The other thing to think about in that regard is as we build these buildings, we build them tight. And there's not a lot of natural air circulation because we're needing to make them much, much more efficient. And so that air exchange keeps the air toxicity from building up. And that's one of the things that needs to happen. Cubic feet per minute. Sorry, how much air the machine moves, cubic feet per minute. That's how they rate that. Sorry.
So depending on the amount, depending on the size of your range gives off a certain number of BTUs. Based on that number of BTUs, there's going to be a certain requirement for the cubic feet per minute that the air needs to be removed from.
And BTU is British Thermal Unit, which doesn't help you at all. But what it really means is how much heat you get.
That's.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Totally. Yes.
Have you seen in Massachusetts where they're not allowing folks to tie off of the main primary residence line for the gas?
So that's interesting. Yes, not the gas, but the water. And the truth is, this new ordinance actually allows you to do that, from what I understand. Okay. But on a town-by-town basis, some of the towns are, I think, looking to create income by the water department being able to charge you for a separate tap. That's not actually okay. If you want to be aggressive with it and push back on it, I think the town doesn't have a leg to stand on in those scenarios. But that does happen sometimes. And my general perspective on working with building inspectors is that no one wins an argument with the building inspector, right? Somewhere along the line, you still pay. Right? So working in a congenial way with them and making sure we understand what they need is better than getting like this with them, right?
Yes, exactly. Any other questions about the ventilation or anything like that?
Can you do liquid propane in Massachusetts?
You can do propane tanks.
100%.
Yes, yeah, you can do
100%,
propane
yeah.
tanks.
Yeah, and you can do it just for your cooking if you want.
Yes, yeah, so you could call, so that's something that you would need to start that process, so the contractor can't do that for you. You would need to call National Grid or Eversource, whoever's your power supplier, and ask them to quote adding propane.
So it wouldn't be, it's actually, the propane's a private supplier. So
I apologize.
Sorry. You just go to anybody
No,
like.
I just want to know, like, if they say, hey, Ashley, you can't tie off the main gas line, and I really want to have gas in this ADU.
Yep.
not electric.
Yep. You can, absolutely. Now, the constraint, or a constraint, is if you're in a town where they're really pushing the envelope in terms of energy efficiency, like Andover, where I live, they're one step away from wanting your home, a new construction project, to be what they call net zero. That's a much more demanding code, and they will allow no fossil fuels in the house. You can have a fossil fuel, you could have gas or propane to run a backup generator outside the house, but nothing in the house. That's an extreme example, but it's coming because we are moving to more and more efficient structures, whether we want to or not. That's where we're going. Yeah. Sorry?
That's why I don't live in Mass. It's understandable. It's understandable.
I hear you.
I'd rather kill myself than live in bed.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. I don't feel that strong.
Fair enough.
So let's move on to bathroom design. So when we're talking about bathrooms, that is something that we definitely want to think about who's living in the space and the requirements for their accessibility. So one of the things to consider, it can be pricey depending on how we do it, but doing a curbless walk-in shower might be worth the money.
And so when we say curbless, right here, you see a transition of the floor. It just smoothly rolls into a reduced location in the shower where it'll gather the water, right? So there's nothing to trip over.
Curbless showers are going to be helpful. Grab bars are going to be helpful. You can get vanities that convert. They look like a normal vanity, and then you can actually take the front piece off of it if somebody becomes wheelchair bound, and now you have a completely accessible vanity that looked like it was normal. It actually has sort of a front case on the front of it, which is nice. Another thing, maybe if you have a small bathroom area, you might want to consider a wall-hung vanity. Again, this is something that if we're trying to be incredibly budget conscious, wall-hung vanities are going to be more expensive than your standard something like this guy, right? Because they're a little bit more difficult to install, but they are great in the way that they do make a space feel a little bit bigger and you have some additional storage underneath. Large format tile in a bathroom is a great idea, especially if mom and dad are cleaning the space themselves on a regular basis, because it requires a lot less upkeep. So I would recommend doing probably a larger format tile on the ground than this hex tile, something with a lot of grip, so that it's not prone to slipping, and then same large format tile without so many grout lines around the shower area. And also you do not need a tub unless somebody really wants one for soaking purposes, but it takes up a lot of footprint and it's difficult to get in and out of unless you do like an ADA accessible tub where you can actually open it up. I don't know if you've seen those where you can open it up and sit in it. So I also love recommending a washer dryer nook in the bathroom rather than having it take up space in the closet. If you can have it take up space in the bathroom, that's awesome. Also, if you want to go in a little bit more of a European fashion, you could also do the washer dryer in the kitchen. Like sometimes people will do fridge and then washer dryer in a pantry closet or something like that. Again, that's pretty, like you see that a lot in Europe. You don't see that too much in the US, but it's just so that you don't need a dedicated space for your washer dryer in this scenario, especially if it's a stacked unit. Questions on any of this?
Washer dryer stacks, did you say what the Cadillac version is versus the Volkswagen version?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I love Bosch and Miele as really great, solid brands. In terms of
They also make compact washer dryers.
They
which
do
are
make
nice too.
compact
And
as
a
well.
compact washer dryer in a small space with two people or one, that it will actually get the job done pretty nicely.
Absolutely.
However, they also offer non-vented units that are like, they don't exhaust out. I'm not a fan of those. So you want to, if you're putting a dryer in, a vented dryer, dramatically more effective than a non-vented dryer. Don't believe what the marketing says.
Those ones we use in the hotel and does both a washes and a dry.
And those are typically non-vented. Those can work.
Yeah.
Those can work just fine, but they make them vented and non-vented. You go out of your way to find the vented. If you're needed to have it all in one,
Okay.
those can work. And there are a few that have come out now that are actually really good. There are a few full-size. LG makes a full-size all-in-one. They're expensive. It's like $2,700 for one unit,
Okay.
but they get the job done in one footprint.
Yeah.
It takes a while for a whole cycle to go through.
It
because
does.
You have one unit doing both washing and drying.
Exactly. It does take a little bit longer, but it does take up less space. So if space is at a premium and we don't want to have to sort of share the main washer and dryer of the house, that is a good option. And to finish the question, I think on the Volkswagen version, I would probably say GE is probably your intro brand. So I would say investing in appliances up to a point is a good idea. So I usually don't say, okay, you need to go get Thermador or you need to go get Sub-Zero for your appliance package, because honestly, because of planned obsolescence, which basically means that now they design things to break in about 10 years, there's not a purpose in spending a ton of money on something. It's not really a buy it for life game anymore with appliances, but I also wouldn't go like entry level, sitting somewhere in the middle.
I've been in my home in Andover, the Republic of Mass, for 25 years, and we're on our third set of washer dryers. And I'm friends with the guy that owns Barron's Appliance, and I went to him and I said, David, if I were to tell you I don't care how much it costs, what's the one that's going to last the longest? And he said they're all effectively the same. They're all going to last the same, regardless of how much you spend on the unit. So being mindful of that is important.
This is just sort of to go over everything that we talked about here. So in the kitchen, we want a compact layout. We want to think about clearances, all that kind of stuff. If we're going with gas, we want to think about how we are going to vent it and calculate in that added expense for going with gas. You want to make sure you're using durable surfaces in all spaces in these ADUs. So I highly recommend quartz for countertop surfaces, tile and LVP for floor surfaces. And then in the bathroom, I would recommend looking into a curbless shower or a low threshold shower. That's another option that just has about, I want to say like a 2-inch threshold versus your standard like 6-inch or 4 to 6-inch threshold. Doing large format tile so that it's easy to clean. This is one that we didn't really touch on, a humidity sensing exhaust fan. One of the things that's great about this is that it's automatic. So especially if an ADU is kind of flip-flopped and maybe you have your children living in that ADU space with a kid, kids are not known for turning off the fan and remembering to turn it off and then all of a sudden...
Or turn it on.
Or turn it on, that too. Yes, yeah, and so it just keeps running and running and running. These are automatic, they're on a timer, and they're humidity sensing. So they'll come on automatically even if somebody forgets to turn it on. So.
And the other thing we can do in bath fans, which I really encourage, is put them on motion sensors on a timer. So you walk in the bathroom and the fan comes on regardless. You're either going to make steam or odor, and then it's on a timer, so it comes on automatically. You can't make that mistake, and then it shuts itself off.
Exactly.
So what's your why for ADU is sort of one of the things I'm talking about here, and the things that we've seen and folks' motivation, right? So we talked a little bit about the kids moving into the family home and mom or dad moving into the ADU getting built onto the kids' homes or mom and dad moving in. So it happens all different varieties and or the in-home care. But I think thinking about the ADU from the standpoint of future flexibility and thinking about it saying, oh, what happens when it becomes an Airbnb or for other use and or income, right? So as I'd mentioned before, income is important to be mindful of based on your town. It's not a permitted use all the time. At the end, you'd also then have to be in a situation where someone would have to figure it out and catch you doing it if you were deciding to get people in. That's, but I think that's something to be mindful of. And it also ties into the financial performance. And when you think about how much money you're going to invest in this, is there going to be a return on the project or not down the road or now, right? So those are both options. And unfortunately, ADUs are not inexpensive to build. So the hurdle for them to become a cash flowing property, a positive cash flowing property, is pretty high, right? It's not like buying a duplex in an area and, where the duplex isn't all that expensive because it's not a super desirable single family home. You can make money off cash flow on a duplex much easier than you can off an ADU because the ADUs are expensive depending on what you're doing. You're building like an entirely independent home within the space and need all the same things you need in a regular freestanding home. So there's issues there. So I cannot emphasize enough, we talked about the importance of design. So many folks start with the idea of, okay, I want this thing, how much will it cost, what do we need? And they leapfrog ahead of some steps. I think the most important thing is being careful about the design side of things, being careful and sensitive to all the folks that are involved, navigating the design process with a young family and a mom and a dad, and being thoughtful and considerate about how we're making that happen and making sure everyone has a voice in the design process is super important, right? And so no one feels marginalized, but people have different agendas, right? If mom and dad are moving into a home and going to build an ADU and it's attached to the kids' home, how does that work? And what does that look like? And who's paying for that, right? And there's there are myriad issues that go into thoughtfully working with clients and designing that structure in a way that everyone involved feels fairly treated and feels like they're excited about it, right? And it feels like it's a good outcome. And I think who pays for it is also a big conversation, right? And it's even a conversation within families in a general sense. We've actually gotten into uncomfortable scenarios where mom and dad have 3 kids, and they are moving to build an ADU attached to the home of one of the 3 kids, and using a significant amount of their net worth to build that ADU, and maybe while they're at it, you know what, honey, we're doing all this work. Your kitchen's tired. Let's renovate the kitchen, right? And so now you've got the ADU and you got the kitchen and you got 2 other siblings who are looking like, hey, what, right? I've seen this dynamic happen in a very uncomfortable way. And I think a lot of that has happened because people weren't communicating well, right? At the end of the day, whenever a relationship breaks down, it's almost always communication, right? And so being thoughtful and working with a designer who's sensitive to that and thinking through that. And maybe that also means you're engaging other parties and the siblings are involved and they get to participate in this conversation and understand what's happening a little bit, right? That makes me, that's like, for me, it's a little bit of an icky feeling because as far as I'm concerned, while mom and dad are alive, it's their freaking money. And if they want to spend it on an ADU, that's their choice. That's not how the world looks at it. Right? That's not how, and do we really want the ADU to become a source of friction in the family? We don't, right? So being thoughtful about that and how that all works is a big deal.
I would broach that conversation early, before you get in front of the designer. Talk about those things together in a family meeting before you get in front of the designer and start talking about it, because I can say time and time again, I've been like, okay, so, and I've broached a question about the design that has not been talked about or considered, and it leads to an argument right in front of your designer. And I
Which
try
we're really
to be
not trained as therapists.
No, exactly, yeah. I try my best to be the mediator of that conversation, but that's a tricky place to be for all parties involved. It's uncomfortable, and then you guys leave, and you're like, you embarrassed me in front of the designer because I was. It's not good. So talk about it early.
And then the other thing that often happens when we're attaching a structure is interior remodels like the existing kitchen or bath or the things that we might modify or build to make the ADU structure work, and then being thoughtful about how that works and how we're making that work well with the house so the design flows nicely and that all the stakeholders, the homeowner and the ADU builder are all coming out in a positive way where they feel good about things. The other thing that often happens too is we need to update mechanicals, right? If you have 200 amps, which most single family homes today generally have, if it was an older, smaller home, you might have 100 amps coming in, which is the electricity, the amount of power coming into your home. If you have 100 amps coming in, you're gonna have to upgrade, right? Because today we use more power than we used to use, all from just across the board. If you have 200 amps, the odds are pretty good you don't need to do that. You could use a sub panel that would service the ADU space and do all the work you needed to. If you have a furnace and the furnace has capacity, you may be able to heat and cool the new space off that furnace. If you were thoughtful about it and say, hey, my furnace died, I know in the near term, I'm thinking about this ADU, I'm gonna put in an upsized furnace to allow for that. You know, those sorts of things can work nicely, but at the same time, if you're doing an ADU and you have an existing furnace and it's old and it's gonna fail, it's got a lifespan to it, wouldn't it be smarter to put in one new updated unit that you have to maintain and service that will handle both spaces than it would to be having separate units, right? It would be smarter. It may not, though, relate to how someone feels about owning their financial responsibility, right? Because now there's only one unit pulling fuel or power in the house. How do I pay my children for that if I'm keeping my space warm or cool, right? So there's different ways to think about that. And then also repurposing spaces to accommodate the ADUs. So we've done ADUs where we made the ADU itself small because the living room, the ADU living space flowed into the living room, and the living room became the bedroom. And we needed to build a kitchen and a bathroom for the ADU, and the living room became the bedroom. And so that whole footprint is ADU, even though part of it was already in the existing house. So there's lots of ways to slice this up and lots of ways to think about that.
And I would talk to your designer about whether or not that's something that you're open to, because that might unlock a whole host of possibilities that weren't otherwise on the table if you are open to, quote unquote, cannibalizing some of the existing home to create an ADU space.
So freestanding versus connected. Freestanding is generally more expensive. I'm actually looking right now at working with modular and panelized companies because I want to try to create an ADU package that allows us to do a detached structure for a lower price point because it's expensive now, right? And so we're exploring that to try to figure out how we can bring something to market that doesn't cost quite so much, but a detached, you have less constraints, right? You're not trying to tie into the existing house. You're not trying to, make sure it's architecturally perfect. You're going to match your siding, you're going to match your roofing, try to make it complementary, but you don't have as many constraints to deal with. So, and then we talked about some of these things, material choice. So when you're thinking about the design process, we already talked up versus out, but when you're thinking about the design process, think also in terms of your level of where you are in the buying continuum. When you're out for a major purchase, like a vehicle or an appliance or something like that, are you a good, better, or best buyer, right? And or do you think differently about this particular project? And generally speaking, you're a better buyer, but on this project, you'll be a good buyer, right? Having that conversation with the person who's working with you on design is super helpful, and helping them understand where you are, they can then give you good guidance about, okay, well, if that's the case, let's talk about these cabinets, let's talk about this floor, let's talk about this appliance, right? Because there's that continuum. So thinking in terms of that as you're beginning to think about the project and the design is super important as well.
One note there, when you're talking about good, better, best with your designer and when you're bringing inspiration to them, especially if you are like scouring Pinterest and stuff like that for certain things, I have noticed that more and more often now that the internet is just like everywhere, I see a couple things a lot that AI photos that are not actually feasible and possible. When talking about features in a kitchen, I'm like, okay, so that's fake, that doesn't exist. Or having pictures that are like driving us into a price point that is sort of astronomical, like it's completely custom cabinetry or something like that. So when you're amassing inspiration for the things, for the features that you want to find in your space, maybe looking also just outside of Pinterest, looking at Houzz, Houzz is a great one, because that does take real projects that aren't just like Better Homes and Gardens type projects and stuff like that. Because I have found a lot of clients who insist that they are in the good category. They want to be very budget friendly. And then we start unpacking their inspiration. And I'm like, okay, so we've got to have a come to Jesus moment. Yeah, exactly. Stop looking at those kind of things. So, yeah.
I'm really a good buyer as long as it's gold.
Yeah, exactly.
And then energy efficiency. That's a net zero is an expensive thing to accomplish right now, but it pays for itself over time. If you can live in a home that effectively generates some electricity, overcomes heating and cooling costs, and doesn't cost anything other than routine maintenance, that's a pretty cool thing and easy to accomplish in a small detached structure, right? Super hard to accomplish to try to make your existing home that efficient, but easy to do out of the gate when it's new. So something to think about. And income, we talked a little about this, so it depends. You might do some different things in design if you're thinking about income. You certainly would do some different things in material choices, right? Like Gates has talked about. If anybody has ever had any rental property, the prospect of screening candidates really carefully is a big deal, right? If you're going to rent the space out on a long-term basis, you don't want to be having to kick somebody out. It's unpleasant and difficult to make.
Also, doing your due diligence and research about tenant laws is a big deal. Like Mass is very pro-tenant, for better or for worse.
Right, but you may think about building it differently, and you may think about outfitting it differently if it's not going to be for a family member, right? So, questions? Can you answer?
Do you have any,
Please.
like 900 square foot, what's the timeline from start to finish? Any
Great
idea in a ballpark?
Sure. This is a general answer, but if you're talking about the construction duration itself, probably 6 months, something like that. But that's not factoring in the planning and the permitting, right? And that could be a 3-month window, could be, like we've had clients take 6 months to select what shade of white they want, right? And that's not an exaggeration, right?
There's a lot of white.
There's a lot of whites out there. But if you're a decisive person and someone shows you something and you can say, I like that, I don't like that, then you can make the design process go smoothly. But you also, if the other thing is, if it's a fun event for you, you don't make it a fun event. Don't feel you can take the time to work through those questions, right? But that's pretty realistic.
Or if you're an indecisive person, telling your designer, I want 3 options. Do not show me the 16 options. Because some people like the 16 options. Some people, it totally stymies them. They cannot move forward with that
I think that's part of the role of a good designer anyway, is there's way too many choices in the marketplace today. And to get to know you a little bit and offer you 3 faucets to choose from, not 100, makes life easier,
Yeah.
right? And so that's an important thing too.
Can you,
Please.
maybe this is a two-part question. Let's say if restricted to a detached unit, let's say it's 900 feet,
Mhm.
square feet. And let's say most of those are gonna be on a slab, right?
So the houses that I showed you in that program are almost all exclusively slab,
Okay.
but there's baggage with that too. So
So
things
what I
are.
was gonna ask you is, can you give like a company, like let's say a model that you would show us, competitive models, is there a per square foot cost that you can, like, because you said the detached are more expensive.
Yep. Great question. So super hard to do, but like in my mind, as I'm looking at the options of trying to partner with panelized companies or modular companies, I'd like to get to a place where you could build not 900, but say 750, and we could do that successfully for under 300, something like that. Right now, that's not the case. We see ADUs at 450. It's expensive, and the problem with that is, part of the problem with it is that we pay effectively like some minimum fees. Like our excavator and our foundation contractor are going to charge the exact same whether that project is 400 square feet or 900 square feet. They're just showing up and digging. Part of the process is showing up and digging and doing the work. It's not the size of the structure. Then when we start building the structure, yes, okay, we have more drywall in a 900 square foot house than a 400 square foot house, but we also have just some sort of, we experience some minimums. Our tiling contractor will charge a flat fee to tile a shower because there's not enough volume in there to charge by the square foot. And that happens in smaller work, right? Mm-hmm. So there's some inefficiencies. And we don't get the benefit detached of being able to tie into your heating and cooling. We have to have an independent heating and cooling system in there. We have to have an independent hot water system in there. We have to have an independent power in there, right? So all of those things are now required, and the code just becomes more, unfortunately, more and more demanding. The electrical code by itself has become meaningfully more demanding. And it's all geared theoretically toward making it safer for you, but I also feel like there's electrical suppliers that are lobbying for the code to be more stringent, and that's what happens, right? So, please.
The detached ADUs, do you have like plans that you go by? Like how do we know what we want? Like I know I want a 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath.
Right.
The garage.
Right.
Is that something that you guys can design from scratch?
Yes.
Yes.
So we do that from scratch. However, yes, the short answer is yes, but get on that website for mass.gov because, yeah, you've taken a peek at that? Okay, so there's a bunch of different options, and so what's super helpful is when you start working with your designer, if you go to Pinterest, if you go to House, and you come and you create a folder that you share with the things that inspire you, right? And we start there, and for us, like design is like at the top of the funnel. We start with all the ideas, and as we spend time working together, the ideas come through down the funnel, and the finished project is what you wanted.
So it could be totally custom.
Totally custom.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It would
Totally
be
custom, yeah.
totally custom.
But
Some of these are like modular, their footprints are just like cookie cutters, and I'm like, well, none of these that I saw on Mass.gov is what I want.
Right. And so right now all we do is totally custom. What I am looking to try to do is something a little less custom so we can meet people in different places in the market and get a delivered finished product at a lower price.
I think
It's a great idea, the prefab.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there are companies that are actively pursuing this market because it's blowing up. There's lots of interest, right?
Even Amazon sells them.
Right, and so you still need the general contractor on site. Exactly, they do, but that's a great point. Amazon sells them.
Fold-up ones.
Yeah, and if you live in California, you're golden, right? But those will never pass code here.
No, I know.
Right?
I know, I'm just
and
saying.
and that's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
And just to make an energy efficient structure, it doesn't come out of a box, unfortunately. Yes.
Do you
When
see
you're-
more slabs on these or more foundations?
Great question. Most of these are designed more slab oriented. Now, that presents a couple of different challenges. We insulate the slabs, right? But they're colder. I will never tell you that that's not the case. If you put an LVP floor down on top of a concrete slab, you're going to feel the difference unless you do radiant. And radiant's a whole nother thing. You can do radiant. Now we can do electric radiant under tile, right? That's a good solution, but that's not your primary heat source. That now just makes the space more comfortable when you're in bare feet, right? And we do that all the time in bathrooms, all the time. It's a bell or a whistle. You don't have to have it, but it's super nice to step out of the shower on a tile floor and have warm feet, right? So So there's variations on how you do that. But
Crawl space.
if you were going to do it on a basement, and now you get another 450, or let's say 600 square feet of basement space, that's a pretty nice thing, but it's probably going to be accessible from a bulkhead outside because you don't want to chew up square footage in the house for a stairwell, which chews up a chunk of square footage, right? You could chew up, 10-15% of your square footage accommodating a stairwell to get down to your basement, right? So there's trade-offs in all of that, right? So how do we think about that and design for that? And I think that the alternative is either on a slab or on a full basement. I don't think there's enough value to put it on a crawl space to make it worth it for you, right? But that's also another thing, another place, like if you think about this, let's say you wanted an air conditioning system, heating and cooling forced air. You are either using a mini split, which have like those heads on a wall that you've seen, or you're using a ducted system. And if you use a ducted system, there's got to be room in the design for the unit itself to be in a closet. Now you just chewed up square footage. When you have a foundation, it could actually be in the foundation. It could be in the basement, right? And you don't use that square footage. So there's all those kind of back and forth options, right, to think about. But like I said, even on a slab, there's no conversation. It's always going to be colder in the dead of winter, even in an efficient structure, right? And anybody that tells you otherwise is selling you something. So
You
please.
can have attic space in these.
100%. You can have an attic space.
You could throw
Yeah.
HVAC.
You can. The problem with doing that is you're putting the heating and cooling system in the most hostile environment in the house. So that attic sees the most extreme changes in temperature. And so when it's 120 degrees in the attic, you're asking your furnace to make it 65 degrees or 68 degrees in the house. It'll do it, but it's going to work a lot harder than it should, right? Yeah, and so that's a big challenge, but it works. It can do it. The other thing, just to come back to, Gates was talking about vertical height and then using your vertical height in the space. Many communities have constraints on how high the height of the building can be, but you could still, they don't have constraints on how much cubic volume. They say you can make it 600 square feet, 700 square feet, 900 square feet, but you can make it 8-foot ceilings, 9-foot ceilings, 10-foot ceilings. So if it's a small space, you can regain some feeling of larger space by increasing your wall height. That's a very insignificant increase in cost to go with higher walls, as long as your overall building height still meets the town requirements, right? Please.
Prices of a two-car garage conversion versus...
So you've come, so it's hard to do it like just wing it, but if I had to wing it, you could probably convert. Now,
well, I just priced one, so I can do that. I can answer that question. So,
I'll give you some numbers.
yeah, exactly. So we just did a relatively conservative estimate for one that did a primary suite. So it wasn't a full ADU. So if we were going to do a full ADU, I would probably say you're looking between $350 and $400. So it's less expensive than doing a full just addition of an ADU, which is probably between $4 and $5. And detached structures are going to be on the higher end of that 4 to 5 scale.
yeah.
So,
And really the value that we have in that is the foundation. Most of the rest of it doesn't have a lot of value to us because it's probably built with 2x4s. We got to make the walls thicker.
And
we're going to do all that stuff, right?
if you did a primary suite, so that was originally just a primary suite addition with a walk-in closet, washer, dryer, and bathroom, you could convert that very easily to a kitchenette for relatively close to the same cost. So if you wanted to do that sort of kitchenette type structure, I think we got on a conservative side where they did their own painting down as low as like $325. I wouldn't really go any lower than that. Almost like a studio, yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep, which is a feasible option if you're okay with sort of having a more active role in the home and in the family, right?
And in that scenario, I'd also look at saying, hey, because I can't control the slab and it's already been built and it wasn't insulated because it was a garage, I'd actually then start thinking about designing a wooden floor in there. So I'd probably build a floor that's 6 inches off the slab, and I can insulate my floor. That means you're going to have 2 steps up into your new space, but now it's comfortable and it's easier to manage.
You have to raise it to match the rest of the house anyway.
Sorry?
The floor in the garage would have to be raised to match the rest anyway.
Yes.
Oh, perfect. So if that's the case. Oh, all right. So it's attached. Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
great.
I think I might have misunderstood you. I was talking
I thought it was
about
detached too.
No,
No,
this is attached.
I was talking
way
about
less.
adding a second floor
No.
to.
No.
Oh, I thought you.
I was okay. So we all misunderstood what was
Who's on
going on
first?
here.
Yeah. So that would be less to make that work. Maybe that's 250. something
To
like that.
convert a two-car
Yeah.
garage into it. Yeah, okay, yeah, you're at like 250 there. If
And
you were
these
adding
are
a
the,
second floor
please don't
above,
hold me
that's
to it
like-
kind of numbers, all right?
Yeah.
We gotta look at stuff, so.
Yeah, the idea is one floor living.
Yeah.
Yes, yep, yeah, exactly.
Other questions? So, the only thing that we ask of you, in addition to finishing off our food, which I want to actually call out Melissa Martin, one of our talented designers here, who baked last night. These are amazing, and so I would encourage that you eat those up. And if you would do the surveys, we greatly appreciate it because we're trying to learn how we can do this better. And we have a couple folks here who would be happy to talk to you about projects. And if that doesn't fit, we're just grateful that you came. Please.
My last question would be, you were saying that once you do this, and you are the owner,
Mm-hmm.
you're the owner, period. What about if you want to sell a house, you want to retire, you go to Florida?
Right.
Is there any restriction there?
So an owner still needs to live in a part of it.
So you would have to, if your kids were involved, you'd have to sell it to the kids?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. And they could then rent the ADU or wherever that worked. But what can't happen is in a single family residence zone, you can't then sell that structure and have a renter and a renter. Right? That's what the town's looking to avoid. That's what the code's looking to avoid. Okay, you have to have an owner and a renter. Yes.
You have to necessarily go back to the request to change the deed to describe, to make sure that that structure is part of that overall.
So the nice thing is, it doesn't require any deed change. It used to require, you used to actually have to call out the limitation on how that space could be used. Now that's not the case at all. So, and you don't want to, like a deed restriction is a bad thing. A deed restriction ties your hands. When it's unrestricted, it's just considered a single family home, other than the fact that a family member needs to, an owner needs to live in one or the other side.
So you capture the value just essentially in the market analysis and the appraisal process.
Yeah.
In terms of the value of the property.
So by the way, that's a great thing, and I should have talked about this. You can criticize me on this survey. Financing, right? One of the tools that you can use if you're looking to finance this is there are banks that will loan you what they call a construction to perm or construction to permanent loan. So they'll do an appraisal of your house right now, and then when you present them with the plans and specifications for the project, they'll then say, okay, when you're done with the project, it's now worth this. So let's say your house is worth $7 right now, and when you're done with the project, it's going to be worth $950, right? You may have had to spend $450 to get it, but you added $350 to the value, whatever it might be, right? $250. So they will then make a loan to you based on 80% of what they perceive to be the increased value. So you have the ability to borrow against the future value of the project you're doing. So it's only one loan, and when the project is done, it converts into a final mortgage. And for the part of the money for the project, they distribute that money as a construction loan, like in progress payments over time. So they'll come and inspect the project while it's happening, and they'll give you disbursements. They'll give the contractor the disbursements while it's happening. But it's a way to stretch your dollar and get the equity, leverage the equity you're building in the project.
Even for a detached.
Correct.
Okay.
So upfront, is there a typical down payment of
20.
20%?
20.
And then, so that's just like an after fair
Mm-hmm.
value valuation.
Right, right. And however, the baggage there is if you're already sitting on a primary mortgage that's in the 3s or something like that, back from when we were in the crazy interest rate lows, they're going to refinance that loan, and the whole loan is going to now be at whatever the current market is, 6 something, right? So that's the only baggage there. But it is.
The option is to go out and take a second loan.
Yeah, you can take a second. Yeah, absolutely. So if you have the equity and you don't want to redo the whole thing, you can leverage the equity in a home equity loan, no problem at all. So, and we've all experienced meaningful lifts in our equity. So, great. Anything else?
Yes.
Yeah, excuse me. Can you
Please.
go over again the, if you want to sell your house and it has the ADA? I didn't really
Sure.
understand.
So there's no baggage in selling it at all. It is just that when you sell the home, the new homeowner will need to occupy one of those 2 units. And quite honestly, I do not know how the town's going to try to confirm this is happening. But what the ordinance now says is either the primary residence or the ADU has to be lived in by the homeowner, right? And that's the only constraint. So there's no baggage other than that. And I think today, the homes that actually already have ADUs that's a meaningful asset in the market, right? It's a niche buyer, but there's just not many of them. And so the buyer who needs that is like snapping those up, right? So.
That's the seller's one property.
Yeah,
Yes,
right. Sells it
correct.
one property. That's the other. Yeah. So it's all, when you do this, the one thing you don't get out of this is the ability to sell the ADU independently, even if it's detached, right? So it's one entity, one property. Yes, Melissa.
Like you said, it's kind of a minor consideration, but I would also advise, and this is just like a separate thing discussion that I've had with your clients, is if you haven't done it already, this would be a good opportunity to convert the entire home ownership into a trust.
Yeah.
And involve the children in that way.
Right.
And that way you're kind of protected down the road from other costs that, that could be attached for your own aging concerns, medical or whatever. If the house is in a trust for a certain period of time, then the state can't attach your money. So talk to a lawyer if that hasn't been done yet, if this is something you're considering, because that's a very good way to sort of circumnavigate all of those financial issues that might come up.
Yep. Nice.